Previously, the ego was attached to weight, whereas now the ego is attached to form, tempo, stretch, volume. It's like people are obsessed with anything but results. All right. Hey, folks. So today's video is going to be about ego lifting. And this topic was inspired by a conversation I had at the gym a couple of days ago, and also just a trend that I've been observing over the last few years, different types of ego lifting across different generations. But before we get into the details, do all the good stuff, do all the YouTube things, comment, subscribe, like the video. And if you are interested in coaching, there's a link in the description. So let's talk about the traditional form of ego lifting. We all know a guy who lifts way too heavy with crap form, partial range of motion, never really grows and just swing things around. In fact, there's a guy who's kind of made a career out of this as El Campeon. Have you guys heard of him? Hilarious, right? I first heard of this guy on Eric Bugenham's channel because he did a react to him. And it turns out I've seen little clips of him, but his whole thing is he lifts way too much weight, bounces things around, uses partial range of motion, all that kind of stuff. And Ronnie Coleman did a reaction of him recently. So he's your prototypical ego lifter. Never really grows from this type of training, but lifts very heavy weights really poorly. So dissecting that a little bit, the problem with these guys is they never really get much stronger. Once you've mastered how to cheat as much as you can with your given level of muscle mass, you're lifting weights which are heavy, but you're not actually growing. So yeah, they kind of just stay small. It's not the kind of training which is going to get you bigger. And it's kind of the opposite of what guys do at the advanced stage. I will slow things down. I might use higher reps. And these are all things that I do to make sure that I'm getting the most out of a given weight. Guys like your prototypical ego lifter, the El Campeon guy, they're not growing because their training just isn't effective. They're not training the muscles through a decent range of motion. And listen, you guys know I'm not a stickler for a huge range of motion, just adequate. So because they're not doing that, even though they're lifting heavy weights, they're not really getting much out of it. Now, I had a conversation with a guy a couple of days ago, and it opened my eyes. It opened my eyes to a thought that's been building up in my brain for a while, and something I've heard expressed by other people as well. And it hit me like a ton of bricks when I was speaking to this guy. So I ran into an acquaintance of mine at the gym. Just one of those guys at the gym you say hello to. He said, "Hey, Faz, how's it going?" "Oh, I've just finished my session." I said, "So how did it go?" And he said, "Look, Faz, I'm really trying to get that teardrop, trying to get my legs like yours, like nice and thick down at the bottom near the knees." And I was like, okay. So I talked him through a couple of things that I do. I like to use a nice full range of motion. I want to stretch my quads under load. So as I was talking to him, he was agreeing and nodding with all those things I said. And the final thing I said to him was, look, you got to get strong too. At my peak, I squatted 255 kilos. You got to get strong, right? You might not have to do that much, but you got to get strong. And he's, yeah, no, fast. Most I can do is 140, like 3 plates aside. And I was like, holy shit. Maybe that's the problem. He almost took a sense of pride in telling me he only squatted 3 plates. It was quite strange. And so I said, look, you're going to maybe want to bump those numbers up a little bit. I got the feeling in that instance, we weren't really on the same page at all. He was a lot more interested in the range of motion, the sculpture of the muscle, the higher volume. I was thinking, that's fine, but it's all for nothing if you're weak as piss, right? So I thought to myself in that second, that's a different type of ego lifting. I'm seeing more and more of this now. Previous ego lifter, the old school ego lifter, was a lifter who was overly focused on weight on the bar. Whereas what we have here is we have a lifter who's overly focused on form, volume, range of motion. If this guy is still squatting 3 plates for a single a year from now, he's not going to be any bigger. I really got the impression that didn't get through to him. I think you guys will agree, right? It's a pretty basic point, because if I was to say to your traditional ego lifter, look, you got to reduce the weight on the bar because that's not going to get you anywhere, I think they would give me the same blank expression that this guy gave me. What do you mean? Get stronger. My range of motion is great. So yeah, I think the modern style ego lifter would give me the same look, the same confused look that an old style ego lifter would give me if I told him to lower the weight on the bar. Anyway, I'd like to know like your thoughts on that, because I think the new wave of lifters, this is what they have to contend with. You know, you guys know about this new gym. This new gym is a younger crowd, which is probably more influenced by modern trends that they see on social media. And a lot of them do have this real excessive focus on range of motion and form and like really slow squeezing tempos. Ultimately, let's bring it back to the middle. Ultimately, I like to think that perhaps we are evolving. Maybe naively, I think we're evolving. I think what's actually happening is we're probably just going from trend to trend and fad to fad. But certainly, you guys, I have a relatively small channel. You guys are an intelligent audience. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. I think there has to be a balance. So you don't want to go excessive with the weight. So your range of motion is compromised. Yeah. And there's a higher chance of injury. You also don't want to go excessive with a focus on volume and range of motion and tempo and control to the point where you could also risk injury from your range of motion or just a lack of progress. I think you need a balance. So ultimately, it boils down to what I always say on this channel, which is your only loyalty is to your results. If you are consistently growing, getting stronger, getting bigger, fantastic. I think you should make sure you're using a reasonable range of motion, a good focus on progressive overload, just adequate form, which is going to get you good results and it's going to improve your physique over time. And this is where I would urge you guys to listen to my whole markers of progression theory. Over the course of a year, you should have some markers of progressions, one lift per body part, which is going to be your deciding, your gauge whether you're making progress or not. When I was powerlifting, it was quite easy because it was a squat, bench, and deadlift. Doesn't get simpler than that. I think one of the reasons I grew so well in those early years was I was a powerlifter. Very often, powerlifters will grow more robustly than bodybuilders because bodybuilders will be overly concerned with form, range of motion, tempo, squeeze, pump, all that kind of stuff. Or like the old style ego lifter, they won't be concerned with form at all. Whereas at least if you're powerlifting, you have standardized form, which is good enough, and you need to get stronger on a select few lifts. Very few ways you can mess that up, you know? So in some cases, powerlifters do grow a lot more robustly and quicker than bodybuilders just because they have an inherent focus in what they're doing. Now, you don't have to focus on a bench squat and deadlift. I think actually it's probably not the best idea if you are not a powerlifter. If you're just a regular guy looking to get big and strong, just focus on some big lifts which you are comfortable with. If you got super strong on a weighted dip, weighted chin, and squat alongside a range of other lifts, but if you really made those your focus over the course of, say, 2, 3 years, you got to the point where you were squatting 4 plates for reps, you were dipping, say, 3 plates for reps, maybe chinning 2 or so plates for reps. I think you would have a great build. You'd have a great physique. So use my markers of progression idea and find some lifts which you connect with and really push those in the midst of a balanced routine. So anyway, I'm going to call it there, but I thought that was a topic which I found quite interesting. This whole idea of ego lifting. Previously, the ego was attached to weight, whereas now the ego is attached to form, tempo, stretch, volume, all that kind of stuff. Hey, I'm doing 30 sets for chest. How many are you doing? I'm doing 35. Okay, I'm going to do 40 next week. It's like people are obsessed with anything but results. And I think that's why people get obsessed with these things because they're not getting results. Whereas I can say, look, nobody questions my training because of the way I look. I could literally do whatever I want in the gym. Nobody would say, oh, that's wrong because, well, look at me, you know? Whereas I think with some of these guys, when they're not getting results, they have to take pride and show off in another way. And previously it was showing off with unreasonable amounts of weight on the bar. Nowadays, it's like showing off with their knowledge of training. But without results, all that knowledge means nothing. All right. I'm going to call it there. Hope you're all having a good day and we'll speak to you next time.